part of that shit. I zoomed in. I'll zoom out a little bit. Those cops will come for you if you're pulling that crap.
They just came with the hammer and smashed the windows.
I'm gonna put it right now. You wanna go? What's up? Somebody hold my blunt.
Hey!
Somebody hold my blunt. Hey! Are you?
God. This is on Hollywood Boulevard. Literally the National Guard. This is not... I'm just driving down Hollywood Boulevard, everyone. Oh.
Lonesome for no one when the room was empty and for us we knew it was obsolete. Nothing could be complete denial. All we do is talk, sit, switch screens as the homeland plans enemies. All we do is talk, static, split screens as the homeland plans enemies. Invasion, so sexy, so sexy. Invasion, so sexy, so sexy. Where does the time go? We're waking up so slowly. Days are horizontal lately. Out of body, watch from above. Out of body, watch from above. Passive attraction, programmed reaction. More information, cash masturbation. Follow the pattern, the headlines, action, distraction, faster than fashion, faster than fashion, faster than fashion. Lonesome for no one when the room was empty and more as we knew it was obsolete. Nothing could beat denial.
See the big picture. There are those of us with eyes to see, and there's people who've done the work for us. We just need to think of a different plan, okay? Because we care about future generations, okay? We inherited this system and we trusted that it was sound, but we haven't been checking back in to see what's been going on. So there's been some collusion and some things under the radar that we might not have been aware of, which we have, the name of the American people has been tainted in many industries. people will say in discussions, because they say that Americans do XYZ in their country, where they go and bring business there and do XYZ. We weren't really sure what they meant when they said that. We thought they were just pissed off at all the McDonald's and Starbucks that are popping up when they want their own personal businesses. And to an extent, that might be a part of it. But it's more so these big industry projects, these big banking ticket item things that probably never get resolved. Like it says that, oh, if we go to Cambodia and we put in this infrastructure system, then their economy will boom times XYZ. And so we're going to print you this loan. You have to use American manufacturers and da-da-da-da. And then the country never can really sustain or finish the project. Even maybe the livelihood doesn't go down. We still incorporate, cheap labor and all these things for these people over here. They're already impoverished, and they're being it's just a terrible system, very inhumane. And we need to look at that. We need to see what this greed profit mindset has allowed to happen, and understand that if it happened way back then and it was systematic and it helps and incentivizes and benefits some people, why would we think that that just faded away into thin air? And then we see where our trajectory is headed, and we see that there are some people that are just so willing to just let it go there. We're not saying that it's true. We're not saying that it's not. We're saying that if there's a reasonable doubt, we're going to investigate, and we can't just give a clean slate, okay? So we need to look, because we're thinkers, we're creators, we're innovators, we're the rational beings of humanity, and we can see the Titanic iceberg 10 years out, and we're like, no, we don't want to hit it. Do you want to just sit and watch it? No? You want to do something? All right, let's do something. We're going to change course real quick, because we can, because we're intelligent, and because we can see patterns, and because we can see empirical evidence, and we know the difference between a conspiracy theory and corroborated facts, right? We do. So, continuing on. Oh, this video is going to be long too. I'm going to break it up into sections. In chapter 4, called Home Sweet Loan, the section titled Socialism Takes Root in America. It all began with a concept. The concept took root in America largely as a result of the Great Depression in the 1930s. American politicians were impressed at how radical Marxists were able to attract popular support by blaming the capitalist system for the country's woes and by promising a socialist utopia. They admired and feared these radicals, admired them for their skill at mass psychology, feared them lest they become so popular as to win a plurality at the ballot box. It was not long before many political figures began to mimic the soapbox orators, and the voters enthusiastically put them into office. While the extreme and violent aspects of communism generally were rejected, the more genteel theories of socialism became popular among the educated elite. It was they who would naturally become the leaders in an American socialist system. Someone had to look after the masses and tell them what to do for their own good. And many with college degrees and those with great wealth became enamored by the thought of playing that role. And so the concept became widely accepted at all levels of American life. The downtrodden masses, as well as the educated elite, that it was desirable for the government to take care of its citizens and to protect them in their economic affairs. So what do we see going on with this pandemic? People can't control themselves with how much toilet paper to buy. So not the government, but the corporations have stepped in and said, no, 1 per person or 2 per family. This is the delegation. Look after the masses and tell them what to do for their own good, because they don't have the wherewithal to decide that on their own. And we're going to create a scenario that can paint this picture for you so that we can direct this narrative the way that we want to go. Again, we're talking about people who study mass psychology, mass psychological social experiments, okay? And there's another section here that is just amazing. There's a report on Iron Mountain or something like. This is real, okay? They've studied us to see how we would react, to see how we would respond, to see what makes us acquiesce and obey without resisting and fighting back. I'm not saying we need to fight back. I'm not saying we need to resist, but I'm saying we do need to use our voice, use our minds, use our wisdom and our intellect, and say, hey, this isn't really that complicated. We can understand this, and we think that there's another way. That's what's happening all around the world right now. And particularly in our nation, where there's certain groups that were undercut in this whole scenario, and they say, hey, well, what about me? Like, I'm an essential worker. My job went away for childcare. I'm an essential part of this structure, but my name wasn't listed in the list of essential people that are going to get financial support in this. Again, the idea that you need that financial support is not necessarily the end goal, because that creates a dependence. Like they're talking about the idea, the Democratic Party talking about the idea of paying Americans $2,000 a month, the idea of getting you on a dependence for a check to come in on a regular basis to sustain your way of life. We need to think of other ways. We have the physical strength, the ability, the might, the mental capacity to create things and get these products created and the engine running, and to facilitate and to run these factories, the manpower, the people, the humanity, the people that have a heart and a soul and care. That's what makes the world system run. So don't start thinking that the doors can be closed on us, right? You can't put us out of business. We are business. We are industry. Okay? Moving forward. This is really long. Sorry, bear with me. We're getting to the juicy parts. Okay, this is in the section, The Creature Swallows Congress. Now this is a section where 22 years later, Vanderlip, one of those original members that went away to Jekyll Island, again, so some people might say, well, if they kept that amount of secrecy and they didn't say their last names, how did we ever find out? It's because these men were proud of what they were doing. Again, these are very wealthy, very affluent people. They had the audacity and the arrogance to do such a thing, to connive that way, and to collude to their own interests and to trick the masses to their benefit. So later on down the line, it's like, you know, I'm not saying anything about O.J. Simpson, but if you're going to get off the hook, if the glove doesn't fit, we must acquit. And then later on, you write a book that says, if I did it, it's like they get a little bit of braggadocious down the line, right? They say, oh yeah, we got away with that, you know, not to say that he did, not to say that they did, but I'm just saying later on down the line, 22 years later, when the need for pretense had long passed, Vanderlip was even more candid. Writing in the Saturday Evening Post, he said, although the Aldrich Federal Reserve Plan was defeated when it bore the name Aldrich, nevertheless, its essential points were all contained in the plan that finally was adopted. And he's talking about the New Deal, the Frank FDR thing that brought around the Federal Reserve. In his autobiography, Treasury Secretary William McAdoo offers his view. Bankers fought the Federal Reserve legislation and even provision of the Federal Reserve Act, and every provision of the Federal Reserve Act with the tireless energy of men fighting a forest fire. They said it was populistic, socialistic, half-baked, destructive, infantile, badly conceived, and unworkable. These interviews with bankers led me to an interesting conclusion. I perceived gradually, through all the haze and smoke of controversy, that the banking world was not really as opposed to the bill as it pretended to be. So again, these were bankers that were fighting the Federal Reserve legislation. They said all these things. The bankers themselves who went in secret, colluded, and created and devised this plan were saying about it in public once it was revealed and launched and projected, proposed to the public as a bill. They said that it was populistic, socialistic, half-baked, destructive, infantile, badly conceived, and unworkable. And it's like, I guess they were saying that because they wanted us to think they felt that way. Manipulation, right? Don't put it past people when the greed motive and the competitive mindset is at play. Don't put it past a person to behave unethically. We've seen it time and time again. And this is the question that's facing humanity right now. Who do we listen to? Do you trust your own humanity, or do you not? Like, do you trust yourself to come up with alternatives, or do you not? Do you sit on the Titanic and you wait for it to sink, or do you change trajectories? We have that choice. What were you doing during the COVID-19 pandemic in history? Your children will say, your grandchildren will say, what were you doing during that time? What happened? What part did you play? What was your perspective? What narrative did you buy into? That is the key to this entire episode, mass psychology. Since Aldrich was recognized as associated with the Morgan interests and Vanderlip was president of the Rockefellers National City Bank, the public was skillfully led to believe that the money trust was mortally afraid of the proposed Federal Reserve Act. The Nation was the only prominent publication to point out that every one of the horrors described by Aldrich and Vanderlip could have been equally ascribed to the Aldrich Bill as well. But this lone voice was easily drowned by the great cacophony of deception and propaganda. So if their voice screams loud or whatever, they project the image that they want people to see, the narrative that they want people to be spewing and repeating. They control the outlets for the major media during that time, such as true today. So the narrative that the people are getting, it's a mass psychology, and it creates the outcome that they want. Understand the possibility. If there's a reasonable doubt, we have to explore it. We have to discuss it because we're intellectuals. And what else are we going to do? We're safe at home. We're safer at home, right? So we're going to think when we're at home. We're not going to sit here and veg out and watch TV. We're going to think. We're going to think, and we're going to get in the game. We're going to show that we care about this country. We care about humanity. We care about the pandemic, but we equally care about our economy. And we're not just going to look left and, see that we're approaching the iceberg on our right, okay? Right? So, almost done. This is going to be another hour-long video. I'm so sorry. I'll break it up. In the chapter, The Doomsday Mechanisms, in the section entitled, America is the Target, the New World Order cannot become a functional reality so long as the United States remains able to go it alone. America is viewed as a potential bull in the China shop. Right now, it is safely under control, but the world planners are worried it might break loose in the future. If the American people were to awaken to the realities of world politics and regain control of their government, they still would have the military and economic power to break away. Among the world planners, therefore, it has become the prime directive to weaken the United States, both militarily and economically. What? Among the world planners, it has become the prime directive to weaken the United States, both militarily and economically. And this directive has come from American leaders, not those of other countries. CFR members, that's the Council on Foreign Relations. CFR members sitting in the White House, the State Department, the Defense Department, and the Treasury are now working to finalize that part of the plan. It is yet one more doomsday mechanism that, once it gains sufficient momentum, will pass the critical point of no return. The iceberg, right? A potential outcome. That doesn't mean it's going to be the ending outcome, because we're wise, we're becoming awakened, and we're looking at this now, right? Forgive me for putting my leg up, but I just need to be comfortable. Looking at the time. Here's the report from Iron Mountain. Now, this is freaking stupefying, okay? When you talk about looking at mass manipulation and psychological plotting about the people and how to keep people in control, it's just fascinating. And the fact that this report from the Iron Mountain is a think tank that was created back in 1966, and this has been corroborated. The fact that that was put together gives me reason to doubt that the American people are fully aware of all the handlings and goings on of a certain government. And so once we become aware, we have a valid and obvious vested interest in speaking and joining the discussion for alternatives and responses during a global emergency. Right now we're operating on the narrative that during a state of emergency, anything goes and government can enact any sort of responses that it deems necessary. And at this point, if the narrative is that it's necessary to look and address the health issue and not address the economic collapse and the tens of millions of Americans who are now unemployed, following the February 2020 address where Trump had unemployment at an all-time unprecedented low, and now we've flown to the other end of the spectrum and are quickly and rapidly approaching not the best financial outcome. It can be seen. It's clear. It's evident. We have empirical evidence that shows what happens when money is flooded into a system, paper money created out of thin air, not backed by any kind of, silverback, whatever coinage, gold standard that used to be in place for eons ago. Okay? What happens is inflation, devaluation of the currency, and destabilization of the economic system, collapse, which creates the need for more government assistance, dependence on a government. And if there's all these closed businesses, then there's only nationalized businesses available or places where you can work for, small penance, and you try and go get your penance. And then it just snowballs from there. We don't even need to go down that track because we have alternatives, right? That's the point. It's like, wake up, see what's going on. Do you have a reason to doubt? Okay, it's possible that something like this could be going on. We're not saying yes, it is. We're not saying no, it's not. We have philosophical discussions, intellectual conversations, because we are the people of this nation and have a vested interest in its success. We need to pay attention to things like this, and we need to be in the conversation about what to do to handle it. So maybe the idea of state of emergency just being handled by in a certain way, maybe that's what needs to change. And we just get the people involved. That's why that call to action is the People Say movement, the peoplesay.org. You can just sign up and with $1 just to express that you're interested in exploring alternatives instead of just crashing on the Titanic. Instead of just sinking, we're going to explore alternatives. It's just the idea of brainstorming. Would you be open to brainstorming alternatives? And if it went down in the history books and they said, what did you do during that time? I decided that I wanted to explore some alternatives. In the final hour before things went bad, I thought, hey, I just wanted to explore some alternatives. And so I put $1 towards that. Every dollar from every person, if you get to a critical mass point, this is private crowdfunding, public crowdfunding amongst the people towards funding existing alternate solutions that are already in place that could save us from an economic collapse. That's the point of it, okay? So that's peoplesay.org on that video call to action that I did. But let me finish and wrap this up. Again, the report on the Iron Mountain. The substance of these stratagems can be traced to a think tank study released in 1966 called the Report from Iron Mountain. Although the origin of the report is highly debated, the document itself hints that it was commissioned by the Department of Defense under Defense Secretary Robert McNamara and was produced by the Hudson Institute located at the base of Iron Mountain in Croton-on-Hudson, New York. The Hudson Institute was founded and directed by Herman Kahn, formerly of the Rand Corporation. Both McNamara and Kahn were members of the CFR. They just keep outlining how certain people are overlaid with certain groups, special interest groups. Okay, so they are in the same circles. Okay, creating different policies and plans and doing just hands in these pots that are doing suspect things. Reasonable doubt. So it's just like, well, why were you doing that if you weren't up to anything? Why'd you do it? It's just like, were you just catching people with a little kid with their hand in the cookie jar in the kitchen, and you said, we're about to eat dinner. I'm like, why did you even unscrew the jar? Why did you put yourself in that position where I had to suspect anything? But since you did, now I have to see what the rest was going on. It just makes logical sense to do that, not to just say, nope. It's a theory. It's not a theory. It's proven. So now what? What do you do when it's not a theory anymore and it's a proven conspiracy? Not saying it is. Not saying it isn't. Just saying we're safer at home. We've got time on our hands. We're going to look into stuff. Okay? Continuing on. The self-proclaimed purpose of the study was to explore various ways to stabilize society. Praiseworthy as that may sound, a reading of the report soon reveals that the word society is used synonymously with the word government. Furthermore, the word stabilize is used as meaning to preserve and to perpetuate. It is clear from the start that the nature of the study was to analyze the different ways a government can perpetuate itself in power, ways to control its citizens and prevent them from rebelling. It was stated at the beginning of the report that morality was not an issue. The study did not address questions of right or wrong, nor did it deal with such concepts as freedom or human rights. Ideology was not an issue, nor patriotism, nor religious precepts. Its sole concern was how to perpetuate the existing government. All right, so I'm going to jump ahead. They came to a major conclusion that war helps keep people united towards a common goal. So that was the strategy for many years, to create some sort of enemy. Okay, moving ahead. This is another aspect of the report where they found that blood games. The report considered ways in which the public could be preoccupied with non-important activities so that it would not have time to participate in political debate or resistance. What? The report considered ways in which the public could be preoccupied with non-important activities so that it would not have time to participate in political debate or resistance. Recreation, trivial game shows, pornography, and situation comedies could play an important role, but blood games were considered to be the most promising of all options. Blood games are competitive events between individuals or teams that are sufficiently violent in nature to enable the spectators to vicariously work off their frustrations. This is a psychological study of people, okay? This is how they found the masses at that time. We want to prove them wrong, right? We want to prove them wrong. As a minimum, these events must evoke a passionate team loyalty on the part of the fans and must include the expectation of pain and injury on the part of the players. Even better, for their purpose, is the spilling of blood and the possibility of death. The common man has a morbid fascination for violence and blood. Crowds gather to chant, "Jump, jump," at the suicidal figure on the hotel roof. Cars slow to a near stop on the highway to gawk at broken bodies next to a collision. Do you do these things? Think about this. Psychology. A schoolyard fight instantly draws a circle of spectators. Boxing matches and football games and hockey games and automobile races are telecast daily, attracting millions of cheering fans who give rapt attention to each moment of danger, each angry blow to the face, each broken bone, each knockout, each carrying away of the unconscious or possibly dying contestant. In this fashion, their anger at society is diffused and focused instead on the opposing team. The emperors of Rome devised the circuses and gladiator contests and public executions by wild beasts for precisely that purpose. Before jumping to the conclusion that such concepts are absurd in modern times, recall that during the 1985 European Soccer Championship in Belgium, The spectators became so emotionally involved in the contest that a bloody riot broke out in the bleachers, leaving behind 38 dead and more than 400 injured. He continues. Having considered all the ramifications of blood games, the report from Iron Mountain concluded that they were not an adequate substitute for war. It is true that violent sports are useful distractors and do in fact allow an outlet for boredom and fierce group loyalty, but their effect on the nation's psyche could not match the intensity of war hysteria. Until a better narrative could be found, world government would have to be postponed so that nations could continue to wage war. Until a better alternative for mass effect on a nation's psyche could be determined, they would have to use the war narrative. Until a better alternative could be found, world government would have to be postponed. Okay, just keep that in mind. This is what this report in 1966 came to the conclusion. This is what they were looking into. I don't know why. Finding a credible global threat is the next section. In time of war, most citizens uncomplainingly accept their low quality of life and remain fiercely loyal to their leaders. If a suitable substitute for war is to be found, then it must also elicit that same reaction. Therefore, a new enemy must be found that threatens the entire world, and the prospects of being overcome by that enemy must be just as terrifying as war itself. The report is emphatic on that point. The direct quote from the report: allegiance requires a cause requires an enemy. This much is obvious. The critical point is that the enemy that defines the cause must seem genuinely formidable. Roughly speaking, the presumed power of the enemy sufficient to warrant, and enemy is in quotes because it doesn't have to be a real enemy. It says, roughly speaking, the presumed power of the enemy sufficient to warrant an individual sense of allegiance to a society must be proportionate to the size and complexity of the society. Today, of course, that power must be one of unprecedented magnitude and frightfulness, end quote. The first consideration in finding a suitable threat to serve as a global enemy was that it did not have to be real. The first consideration in finding a suitable threat to serve as a global enemy was that it did not have to be real. A real one would be better, of course, but an invented one would work just as well, provided the masses could be convinced it was real. The public will more readily believe some fictions than others. Credibility would be more important than truth. Okay, now just think of that in terms of, again, we're just home to think, so we're just thinking through things. It's a global think tank. Just like they had a global think tank, we're going to have a global think tank. ThePeoplesSay.org, we're going to have a global think tank. It's innocent and it's legal. It's just to keep us busy. So, because we're intellectuals and we can do that. We have a right to do that because we have skin in the game. This is part of our future. We're writing our history right now. We don't want it to say that we did nothing. We at least explored all options. So this is saying, based on this report, the consideration in finding a suitable threat to serve as a global enemy was that it didn't have to be real. It had to be convincible. It had to be, the people had to be convinced that it was real. It had to serve as enough of a high unprecedented magnitude to cause enough fright that the public would readily believe in it and acquiesce. Okay? So what do we have right now? We have an invisible threat that's out there. No one can see it. No one can smell it. You can't taste it. You can't touch it. And then you have certain people talking about manipulated numbers. You have certain people talking about the tests being adjusted to such a fine, such a vast level that it's looking for traces of something so small that it's spreading up and amping up the findings that would create a positive reading within that test. So say I'm looking for one small type thing but it's so small that I can't see it. I have to zoom in so far and increase the parameters so wide, and that it's not really even testing for that certain thing. Go back to David Icke. He's got doctors that explain this expertly. I'm not an expert, but the concept is understandable. You increase the testing range or whatever, you're going to get more people to test positive. It's like grading on a curve, and it's in that unfair slant. Okay, so it's like we're getting so many more things that say, yes, this is present in here, but what it's testing for is a respiratory gene, and almost everybody has these same genes in themselves dormant, and to whatever degree that it's been impacted by pre-existing conditions, respiratory illnesses, your environment, the air quality and things like that, which people were writing about in all these countries where they had the major, most devastating effects of the pandemic so far, which is in the Dr. Chevy speech that I'm going to transcribe and read. These are things just to pay attention to because we're intellectuals and we're looking at the whole thing. So it's created, so there could be something, a phantom thing whose impact might not be as major as it is, even if that's just a possibility. We have that, and then we have it coupled with the ramifications and the implications of a collapsed government. Government. We're not going to try and collapse you, don't worry. A collapsed economic system. That's what we're being faced with. And so those two things being in bed together raises the question for us to look at something like this in more detail, where a report was conducted in a private think tank to see how people can be manipulated, their psychology, so that they can be controlled in a certain situation, so that they can be moved without regards to ethics and morals, right or wrong, just so that they can be swayed towards a certain outcome, okay? If that were to happen to us, what are the ways that they might be able to do that? And then we look at all the facts. And then we discuss alternatives. Alternative healing methods. If they say, okay, this is a really bad illness. Okay, well, we got healers over here. We've got spontaneous remission over here. We're quantum beings. We can heal ourselves over here. We've got other ways of handling things, but you're only talking about one thing. You're talking about a vaccine, right? You're talking about studying certain things. You're shutting down businesses while this is happening. Why is this happening? There's other things that we could do. Or you're saying that it's okay to crash the economy because we're focusing on saving lives, but you're not looking at all the alternatives and ways that we can save lives. So it just makes me talk so fast because I see these things. So surely you see more, or you see something like, and then if we come together and we have a think tank like they did, we can really come up with some brilliant alternatives, right? That's what this is about. This is a critical time that's going down in the history books. And these are the things that we're going to discuss because we're not going to passively sit here like with dunce caps on, like we don't have skin in the game. This affects us. It's affecting us right now. It's affecting someone you know who is put off work, who doesn't have a check coming in. It doesn't matter if you have a check coming in. You're not going to say, I'm not going to care because I have a check coming in. You're thinking about future generations. You're thinking about what's going on in that history book. What did you do during that time? That's what we're thinking about, okay? And they went and they had this think tank, the Iron on the Mountain. It says poverty was examined as a potential global enemy, but rejected as not fearful enough. Most of the world was already in poverty. Only those who had never experienced poverty would see it as a global threat. For the rest, it was simply a fact of everyday life. Again, it's not psychologically moving enough to make them fear poverty. Now, what can we do to make people be really affected on a psychological level? How can we really stir them and invoke fear that creates acquiescence to whatever we mandate, and then we can come in as the rescuer so that we can then enforce whatever narrative and subsequent actions that we decide. Certain people could be having that train of thought. If it's a possibility, if there's even one iota of a chance that that's a possibility, then it's important for us to discuss this and discuss alternatives just for that reason alone. And since we're quantum beings and we understand that we live in a realm where all things are possible, and there's infinite possibilities and infinite timelines, we do know that that's very possibly a truth. That is very likely that there is a timeline where that is true. So therefore, it's absolutely important that we explore this right now of all times, because we're 10 years ahead of the iceberg. We're sitting on the Titanic, and we're not just going to stand here and watch it sail into a collapse, right? That doesn't make sense. It would be insane, right? And we are sane. It even says here, I just thought this was funny, it says, an invasion by aliens from outer space was given a serious consideration as well. They went through all kinds of alternatives. What can we do to make the people band together, adopt and support and defend a narrative and listen to what we say? Because they have no, it's unprecedented and it's fear-inducing, right? An alien invasion from outer space was given serious consideration. The report said that experiments along those lines already may have been tried. Public reaction, however, was not sufficiently predictable because the threat was not credible. Here is what the report had to say. Credibility, in fact, lies at the heart of the problem of developing a political substitute for war. This is where the space race proposals, in many ways so well suited as economic substitutes for war, fall short. The most ambitious and unrealistic space project cannot of itself generate a believable external menace. It has been hotly argued that uniting mankind against the danger of destruction by creatures from other planets or from outer space. Sorry, let me read that over. It has been hotly argued that such a menace would offer the last best hope of peace, etc., by uniting mankind against the danger of destruction by creatures from other planets out from outer space. Experiments have been proposed to test the credibility of an out-of-our-world invasion threat. It is possible that a few of the more difficult to explain flying saucer incidents of recent years were in fact early experiments of this kind. If so, they could hardly have been judged encouraging. Again, their purpose is to influence so many people that they control an outcome, and they're like, it didn't have as much pizzazz. We need something bigger, more teeth. We need more teeth. What movie is that in? I think it was Jurassic Park, where they were like, they're trying to create this amazing park so they can get all that money, right? Competitive, profit, scare people. We need more teeth, bigger teeth. I don't care what it takes, more teeth. We need people to be scared when they come to this park. They're going to pay because they want to be wowed. They want to be scared of something. They want to be excited and roused into action. So we need more teeth. And then the scientist's like, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and put together a frog with a velociraptor and a tyrannosaurus, and I'm going to put together this blowfish, and it's going to be crazy, and it's going to have skin change color, and it's going to be able to be real fast. And then the thing hatched, and it's like, well, what the hell did you do? We can't control this thing. It said, you just said you wanted more teeth. So I created this thing that can become invisible. It can be smarter than our heat protection. We can't see where it is. It can jump over sky-high walls and stuff. I manipulated it in a laboratory because you told me X. You told me morality wasn't an issue. You told me there is no right and wrong. You told me that we just want to fulfill this competitive. You just said more teeth. So we gave you more teeth. We didn't think about the implications it was going to have on humanity when Jurassic Park gets run over by dinosaurs. Now we got Jurassic World and a great old, it's all cool. But it all models after what we're facing right now. So we got to look at it. I'm getting tired, but I'm almost done here. They looked at the environmental pollution model. Here later, I just flagged the section where it talks about authenticity of the report. Again, later on down the line, there's people that were just so braggadocious about it that they actually corroborated that they worked on or they were offered to work on this report, that it was a real thing. So it's been corroborated by certain people in the past. This gentleman here, John Kenneth Galbraith, a Harvard professor, he said that he had been a member of the CFR, and he was actually invited to go to participate in that think tank, but he was unable to be part of the official group. But he says, furthermore, he doubts the wisdom of letting the public know about the report, but he totally agreed with the conclusions. So this is just the thing that happens when you compartmentalize intellectuals. So in the think tank that we're going to be working towards a common goal for good. Wow, I've never done it that bad. a common good for goal, a common goal for good. This think tank was just, you're really smart. Come and join us. We want you guys to think out this thing. Like, there's no limits. Just think out all this stuff. And they're just like, okay. They said that there was thousands of hands that were working to build the nuclear weapon. But they had no idea what they were actually a part of building, because they were all so compartmentalized in their job. Each person was told to do one small thing, one part thing, and then they didn't know that they were unified contributors to creating this huge weapon. Like, that's not good for humanity. A weapon that could neutralize existence. Would we work on that if we knew about it? So they don't keep us abreast of all the information. We don't get the full picture. There's things that are conspired and information is withheld. But then when we have that information, what do we choose to do with that information? Certain systems say that the people are not wise enough to come to their own conclusions, so they need to be guided. So they need to be looked at as the poor masses that need to be told what's for their own good. We're here to say, no, that's not true. That's incorrect. We're actually intellectuals. We're actually the hands, the brunt of society that do the labor, that keep the engine running, that you need to promote whatever system that you're even thinking of having, but you just want to be the ones, dangling the strings. Not to say that that's true, but if there was, that there's a reason to doubt, and if there's a possibility, which we all know, quantum beings, we're open to that. So we're saying, hey, all this research and all this time and dedication that has been put towards not a common goal for good, we can equally put that same effort in this Age of Aquarius, this rise of consciousness, in a think tank for good, things that benefit us. Think how long this is. I'm definitely going to break it up. This section again called Doomsday Missions. It is not important whether or not Maurice Strong's plot for global economic collapse is to be taken literally. What is important is that men like him are thinking along those lines, just like I was talking about. As Wood pointed out, they are in a position to do it, or something like it. If it is not this scenario, they will consider another one with similar consequences. If history has proven anything, it is that men with financial and political power are quite capable of heinous plots against their fellow men. They have launched wars, caused depressions, and created famines to suit their personal agendas. We have little reason to believe that the world leaders of today are more saintly than their predecessors. Furthermore, we must not be fooled by pretended concern for Mother Earth. The call to arms for saving the planet is a gigantic ruse. There is just enough truth to environmental pollution to make the show credible, as the report from Iron Mountain phrased it. But the end of Earth scenarios which drive the movement forward are bogus. The real objectives in all of this is world government, the ultimate doomsday mechanism from which there can be no escape. But that's also a finality and a totality that's not true, because as quantum beings we know that it's never the end. All we have to do is unlock and unleash our potential, rise up in our divinity, allow higher source wisdom to come down, activate our source Merkaba, which is that call to action video, the thing that I channeled. Once you become aware of who you are, you unlock outcomes and potentialities that were not previously available, right? So in the history books, when you look and you ask somebody, what were you guys doing at that time? They didn't have the same abilities. They didn't have technology and the resources and all this stuff at their fingertips put out in front of them like we do. We kind of have like a dessert tray of all kinds of stuff in front of us. And then also like freaking instant, access to the monopoly bank with the money and the resources to do things ourselves. Yet we're over here looking at this kind of money because we said, no, that money's real. This monopoly money is not real. Our human energy, current energy, the exchange of our own souls and interacting and supporting each other. We're saying that current is not as strong as the currency that they've subscribed as the rule of the day. We unlock some of these things psychologically. And they've been psychologically and systematically ingrained within us that you don't question. Some people don't. The people we're talking to, you're aware of this. You get it. So this section here, education as a tool for human engineering. Sorry, got to get the education industry in here because they conspired there too. We have to understand this. A lot of people just don't know. We simply don't know. And we don't want to be one of those hands working on a nuclear weapon and not understanding what we're working on, what we're building. We want to make sure that what we're building is conducive to human excellence, unleashing our potential, thriving and striving and making the world a better place for everyone, right? That's what we want because we don't have this competitive mindset. We have unity consciousness. We're ascending, right? Okay, the third printout is dated 1904 and is a report issued by the General Education Board, one of the first foundations established by John D. Rockefeller Sr. The purpose of the foundation was to use the power of money, not to raise the level of education in America, as was widely believed at the time, but to influence the direction of that education. Let that sink in. A financial powerhouse created a board, a general education board, to use the power of money, not to raise the level of education, but to influence the direction of the education. Why might that be? We're going to look into it. If you think this only happened back then, we had a U.S. Department of Education member leave and write a book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. Read that book, or look into that as well. Still talks about that as it was going on in modern day. Okay, so some of these practices have definitely trickled down. It says don't put it past our system to think that everything just went away overnight. All these things that people work so hard to put in place, they're still going to have they're still going to have remnants in our existing society. And you're going to see it around you when you look at certain things. Okay, right. So continuing on, I was going to say something that is probably dangerous for me to say. Nothing's dangerous. I'll say it. Like Common Core. There are those who would argue. See, we're not saying one way or the other. We have a philosophical think tank and discussion groups. We're discussing things openly because that's our birthright. We've inherited this country with certain freedoms, and we're accepting that right, and we are enforcing it. Okay, so Common Core curriculum, the idea that certain things, any answer goes. Some people have connected that with the work that she spoke of in the book Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, which was written by someone from the U.S. Department of Education who left, who separated. And here saying back in 1904, John D. Rockefeller Sr. created the General Education Board, which had that express interest of using money not to raise the level of education. That wasn't the goal. The goal was to divert the direction of it. And we're going to continue and see why that might have been. Specifically, it was to promote the ideology of collectivism and internationalism. The object was to use the classroom to teach attitudes that encourage people to be passive and submissive to their rulers. Sounds like the same thing as the Iron Mountain. So much effort has been done. So much effort, right? So much effort. We're going to meet in secret. We're going to use first names only. We're going to... Okay. The object was to use the classroom to teach attitudes that encourage people to be passive and submissive to their rulers. The goal was and is to create citizens who are educated enough for productive work under supervision, but not enough to question authority or seek to rise above their class. This all sounds like psychology. True education was to be restricted to the sons and daughters of the elite. For the rest, it would be better to produce skilled workers with no particular aspirations other than to enjoy life, blood games, distractions. Do not participate in discourse, political debate, exploration of financial markets, trying to understand tough concepts, quantum physics. We're going to stay away from that. It doesn't make sense. Spirituality, woo-woo stuff, it doesn't make sense. But now it does. The people we're speaking to, it makes perfect sense, right? We're just baffled by how this is all here. This is already all just in one book. There's like stuff everywhere. And that's what's the beautiful thing about this time. We have so much information at our fingertips. It's already been done before us. We've already got great people working on initiatives and projects to help rebuild and restructure and do things that are so amazing and that could cause so much liberation and freedom. break away from this 9-to-5 lifestyle, the rat race, break away from having this debt fiat currency system, break away from having illness and ailments and fear of health and things, because we can heal ourselves. We can work with healers. We can have spontaneous remissions like the placebo effect. Again, this stuff is scientific now. It's been proven. It's been replicated and everything like that. We're way beyond the point of acting like things are just, theories, right? This is beyond theory. Okay? It was enough, as Tocqueville phrased it, that the people should rejoice provided they think of nothing but rejoicing. I mean, we also know that the psychological influence and the mass manipulation of the media industry. So we have the media industry telling women how to be less traditionally feminine and men to display toxic masculinity. And we have coincided parallel to that, a beautiful movement in the spiritual movement, activating and teaching people about the divine feminine template and the divine masculine template. Divine just meaning our essence, the core that is within one and the same within each and every one of us, which is the abilities and the powers that we have when we conquer and we master all the elements of our essence, the elements that make up the world, our fire, our earth, our groundedness, our passion, our fire, our emotions, our water, and our air, our ability to think and postulate and speculate and use our words, the sword and the tarot, to articulate and to speak. All of these things are powers of the divine being unified. And when you master those things, the divinity rises within you to where you can lift up your consciousness. And I'm quoting over here from that call to action video that we're talking about with the triangle of enlightenment with the three master numbers, 11, 22, and 33. At the top, the 33, the master teacher and the master healer, when your ascension, when your wisdom and your ability to be illuminated into higher consciousness is activated, and you're able to build upon that with the aspects of the master builder, and you become the master teacher and healer, and you're able to spread that wisdom. You ascend out of body and you access higher realms of information. We are at the age of Aquarius, where we now activated the inverse, and so that higher wisdom can be safely descended down into our bodies, and we can activate and ignite our divine template, aka unleash our human potential, aka the life mission and work of Stephen Covey, aka just be a good person, do good things in the world. It doesn't have to be all woo woo woo, but it lines up and it's parallel. So there's stated evidence of efforts to derail humanity from its natural blueprint and birthright. And then there's this simultaneous movement of ensuring that we wake up to it, right? And it's like this race to the finish. We know where we're going, but it's still important that we step up and we do what we can to get there. It's not going to just happen automatically while we're just sitting back eating popcorn, waiting for them to say, okay, yeah, we can watch football again. Are you happy? Do you feel good? Hey, the restrictions have been lifted. You can go outside of your house now, but we're going to check your temperature every day. We're going to track you in a car. We're going to put this chip in you so that we can find out where you are, just in case you get this phantom. Okay, we're not going to go there, but I'm just saying, if there's a possibility, it's worth exploring, because we're intellectuals. We're rational, right? We see the big picture and we understand there's been a long history of collusion. But we're not ignorant to that fact. So we're going to conspire for the good. Right? Okay. So in the first publication of the General Education Board, Fred Gates explained the plan. Again, corroboration right here. You said it outright. This is how he delivered the plan of the Board of Education. I'm sorry, the General Education Board. Sounds a lot like the Board of Education, actually. In 1904, their plan. In our dreams, we have limitless resources, and the people yield themselves with perfect docility to our molding hands. The present educational conventions fade from our minds, and unhampered by tradition, we work our own good upon a grateful and responsive rural folk. We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers of mental learning or of science. We have not to raise from among them authors, editors, poets, or men of letters. We shall not search for embryo great artists, painters, musicians, nor lawyers, doctors, preachers, politicians, statesmen, of whom we have ample supply. We've got plenty of smart people with us. We got that covered. The task we set before ourselves is very simple as well as very beautiful. To train these people as we find them to a perfectly ideal life just where they are, in the homes, in the shop, and on the farm. That's a lot of words to say. Let's keep them small and simple. We've got plenty of people over here that are smart. This is our plan for education. It makes no sense. But this is what the people with the financial means invested in money in a system where there's a profit motive and those things collude and there's a conflict of interest. So now that money was injected into the system, and these twisted, warped views were able to manipulate and pervert systems that are fundamentally good. And this is what we're looking at, and this is what we're discussing. Okay? Coming up to the conclusion here. I know this is heavy, but this is real. This is what's going on. This is what's going to be written down in history, and it's important to discuss it, because we're going to change trajectories. In the realistic scenario section towards the very end, he says, no matter what scenario unfolds in the future, there is white water ahead. We had better tighten our straps and prepare for the rapids. We owe it to ourselves and our families to take measures which will increase our chances of coming out at the other side. If the pessimistic scenario is played out, it will make little difference what we do because there will be no other side. Again, I'm not subscribing to that. We can still, no matter where it goes, but we aim to redirect well far in advance of all the suffering and chaos, because they say that some people aren't stirred to action until it gets to the final things. Like, you don't have to be impoverished. You don't have to be starving. You don't have to be in a dictatorship in order to really see where systems, things are right and wrong. You can do it from right here where you're at. You can be sat 10 years ahead of even boarding the Titanic and have common sense to say, I'm not going to step on a ship that I know is going to sink. I wouldn't do that. I would take the measures that I can now because we're well capable of doing so. There's many that are already doing the work. We can just join them. We're capable of making that decision early on. And we also wouldn't just go on business as usual and say, hey, I'm not going to get on the Titanic. I'm not going to sink. We're all on it. And it's not to say, oh, it's not going to happen in my lifetime. It's just going to be my grandchild that's going to get on the Titanic. We wouldn't do that. We're humane. This is humanity. It's time for us to show what we're all about. It's a beautiful, beautiful time to be alive, right? That's why we're here. That's why we chose to be here. But in the realistic scenario, there are certain precautions that will make a big difference in our economic well-being. To fully appreciate the wisdom of some of these measures, it is well for us to pause and consider the possibility that a transition to economic safety and sanity will not be orderly. Another variant of the realistic scenario is that our entire system could collapse, including the international structure being assembled at the UN. If that should happen, we won't have to worry about an orderly transition to a sound monetary system because it won't happen. Our primary concern will be basic survival. We don't want to get to that point, right? Our economic chaos and civil disorder would not necessarily have to be the prelude to world government. If a sufficient number of people were well enough informed to know in advance what the enemy's game plan is, and especially if they were in the right places within the system, they might be able to provide leadership at the critical moment. If there is blood in the streets and long periods of anarchy, it is theoretically possible that groups of enlightened individuals who have prepared in advance could move into the power vacuum and take charge. That may sound like another pessimistic scenario, but it is not. In the final analysis, it may be the most realistic one of all. But we should not hope for it. All we can do is prepare for it should it come to pass. And that's what this is about, preparation. I'm going to leave it right there. This has been an hour and 37 minutes. This is crazy. I'm going to see about chopping it up into different parts and then leaving one full one for whoever wants to look at it. Thank you so much for your time if you got here. This is amazing to be a part of, and I'm really happy that you're interested in your life and your livelihood. It's huge. It's commendable. I commend you for that. I have a lot of respect for you for that. And future generations will have a lot of gratitude and appreciation to you for that. And this nation and the world is really at the mercy of someone like you who thinks and is receptive to the big picture and seeing how you matter. And you do have a say and you do have a voice in what you want to see happen in the world. Truly is. As Gandhi said, you are the change that you wish to be, the change that you wish to see in the world. That's the only way. I mean, head over to peoplesay.org, make that little dollar pledge, have everyone you know make that little dollar pledge. We're just going to see, we're going to form a psychological experiment, a social experiment to see how much money we can crowdfund amongst each other for the explicit purpose of funding missions and systems, alternate systems and ways of life that haven't been perverted and wouldn't be perverted because they're not based on the same profit, greed, competitive paradigm that our history is based on. And we're going to see how those work out as an alternative. We can start in seeded small towns, like Michael Tellinger's One Small Town project. We can still infuse that society with all the same things, the systems that make this great. Someone argued in opposition, on the Huffington Post article, argued in opposition really quickly to the Thrive movement, the Thrive project. The Thrive movement, which is Procter Gamble and his wife's documentary that they created. And this Huffington Post article argued they're basically creating or positing this sort of utopian society where they just run away from government and create this idealistic society where they're going to lose all of the social systems that keep a government keeps in place. So they're going to do away with all the great things like child labor laws and women's rights and equal, all the civil rights and things like that. That's going to go out the window, and all the uniform police, infrastructure that keeps crime and all that stuff, it's going to go out the window. It's like, no, remember, when arguments like that are posed to us, we're the ones that are wise enough to know when we create a system, we're going to look at it from all angles. This is a think tank. This is why we have diversified persons from all kinds of industries and backgrounds in the room, because they can help us to see, oh, no, this could have this, or we'll bring it in. Why would a group of intellectuals introduce a new system and create the same loopholes that would cause inhumanity? We've already learned those lessons from history. So of course we would adopt and bring in those things that make sense towards a human and humane way of life. We would implement that in our system as well, correct? We wouldn't violate, a child's right to life and put them to work and practice some kind of slave labor and put that on a child. We wouldn't do that. That doesn't make sense. It's nonsensical. But these are the arguments they pose to you because they have this stigma against a utopia, right? But dystopia is what we're supposed to adopt to as the new normal. I don't think so. I don't see it that way. I think utopia is possible. I think utopia is ideal. And if it's not what we have, it should at least be what we strive for. We shouldn't just submit to anything less because it just seems like it wouldn't work. That doesn't make sense. We already have many people who have put together systems that show that there's alternatives. I've read plenty of it in my own research, in my own work over the last 10 years. So surely other people who've been doing this for much longer have seen even more stuff. And I'd love to have those people in the room as well, because we're gonna explore this because we have the time, and now is the time. And now I'm going to be quiet and stop. Again, thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon. I'm going to be recording and releasing some more of those transcribed messages from some of the most amazing speeches and commentaries that are going on right now from people all over the world. in all different industries and all different specialties, and their opinions from everything from scientific to spiritual to just all kinds of things. There's important conversations going on around the world, and we might be missing it because it's all digital, you know, it's all spoken. And I'm going to write it down and transcribe it so people in different languages can have access to it and read it. And then I'm going to recite it as well in my spoken voice, because sometimes people hear messages differently as they're delivered from different octaves. Sound has a different effect on the psyche of human people. We're going to study all of these things. There's so much available to us, so much available to us as we unlock our potential and we step into our humanity, which is only been, this much of it has been seen by the world so far. This is such a great time. All right, take care.